All right, just give me 30 seconds then, guys.
We're live right now.
Yeah.
Not on mine yet.
Not on Jason, so hold on a second.
Yeah, 1 second. All right, just give me 30 seconds then, guys.
We're live right now.
Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, simulcasting for the first time with Action for Assange. You're looking at Taylor Hudak right there, and then everybody else. I should get out of the way here so you can see Ian Shackleman joining us as a guest, Christy Dopp, the other co-host. There's Steve from Slow News Day, and of course, Andrew as well. So I'm just going to let Taylor kick this off, and basically what we're going to be doing a couple times a month. We're going to simulcast here, and then if you want to keep with them, because they do this for 3-4 hours, which is a little bit longer than my broadcasting, you can go over to, and I'm going to put you guys over here right now. You can go check them out at Action for Assange, or subscribe right now. Jump over to Action for Assange. We're simulcasting over there. So without further ado, here's the Action for Assange crew, where we'll be going over the OPCW 4 leaks and much more today. Andrew, with us, brother?
Thank you, guys. Okay, Jason, thank you so much for that intro. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Hudak, and I'm joined by my co-hosts this evening, as usual, Andrew Smith, Christy Dopp, and Steve Poikinen. So it's the first day of the new year, New Year's Day. I hope all of you had a great New Year's Eve, and you celebrated and are looking forward to 2020. We know with Action for Assange, we have some things planned ahead, some exciting new changes to be made with Action for Assange and our vigils in particular. But before we get to our guests of the evening, some stats here. Today is day 265 since the brutal arrest of WikiLeaks publisher and award-winning journalist Julian Assange, and it is 3,312 days since his unlawful and arbitrary detention. And as for Chelsea Manning, it is 294 days in jail and $185,000 in fines. Remember, she is being fined $1,000 every single day just because she is refusing to testify before a grand jury. So for this evening, we do have 2 returning guests with us. Our first guest you already saw, Jason Burmis. He is an activist, content creator, and documentary filmmaker. And we are also joined with Ian Schlackman, and he is an anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, anti-capitalist, millennial socialist futurist. He's working with comrades like you to create an innovative, free, modern, and human rights-based social economy, or socialist economy. So thank you to both of our guests for joining us. How are you guys?
Good, great to be here.
Super fantastic. I hope everybody else having a happy 2020. Everybody party hard last night or what?
Yeah.
No, I'm
No.
41. I don't do shit anymore. I did not.
Hopefully you partied for us, Jason.
I mean, I had a few. I kicked a few back. I'm not too bad today. I had a few. I'm not that old. It's okay to kick one back. But, I do want to point out, you just said $1,000 a day for Chelsea Manning.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, Conor McGregor, for his 19th conviction, and this is outside of all the sexual assault stuff that I talk about, for punching that old man in the face, was $1,000. Think about that. You have a hero on one end that is trying to be forced to lie about another hero and being fined $1,000 a day. And you have that same judicial system here in this country trying to extradite another person on behalf of them and literally trying to silence them financially on top of it, on top of the torture. I mean, we call ourselves a first world country, but we sure pull some really fucking banana republic third world shit. Just my opinion.
No, you're absolutely right. And what
True.
Andrew put in the chat, this is something that we talked about on Chelsea Manning's birthday vigil. But the stats were actually broken down, and I will pull that up real quick on the screen. A breakdown of Chelsea Manning's decade. 77.7%, 6% of the decade incarcerated. over 10% of it in solitary, over half of it fighting for gender affirming care, 100% being true to myself no matter what, and 0% backing down. If you're going to spend more than 3/4 of your life, or at least your basically adult life, because she was, in her early 20s when she went in, incarcerated, and still have that kind of sense of humor that shows a strength that I think most people don't have. But man, that's just, along with $1,000 a day in fines, that's an insane amount of time to be locked up just for supplying the information to WikiLeaks that she did.
And let's not forget, it's contrived double jeopardy. They can say this is a separate charge, but we all know that, again, the surprise move of the Obama administration for me was the Iran deal and was the commuting of Chelsea Manning's sentence. I didn't see that one coming. For it to come full circle right now in the way it has, it's revolting. Steve, do you want me to play that clip? Do you guys want to play that before we get into anything else?
Oh,
Yes,
sure. I'll pull that up real quick.
I got it right here.
Give me.
I got her.
Okay, yeah, then
And
go
we
for it.
trust the media. That's the media that has called for me and my staff to be assassinated, droned, rendered, and prosecuted for espionage, for our publications and for our involvement in the Snowden case. Noam Chomsky, in The Common Good, wrote that the smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but to allow very lively debate within a narrow section of that spectrum. We live in a mediaocracy. What is politically possible is defined by the media environment. I started WikiLeaks because I understood this reality. The media frame defines the political possibility. So to bring about meaningful change, we have to enlarge the media frame. With WikiLeaks, we've had significant successes in achieving this in some areas, but more needs to be done. The single greatest contributor to our expanding horizons is you. You telling your friends what's up, what you saw, what you believe, and who's full of it. Contrasting what appears in the Australian press to itself and to the world. You form part of the largest bullshit detecting machine the world has ever seen. That's why WikiLeaks has such support from people exposed to the internet. That's why we have such support from this generation, because you're better informed. This is the best educated generation in the history of the world.
And there you go. And that's why they're still relevant today. You look at those leaks and the media narrative, let's talk about them. Here's the OPCW 4 leaks right behind me. I've read some of these documents, including the new emails. And now, you have Tariq Hadid, who left Newsweek saying, listen, they were literally spinning a narrative. And now what do we have? Well, we have strikes a few days ago that have now led to, basically a step closer to a proxy war with Iran, especially with what's going on in Baghdad. And if you don't think they're all connected, they absolutely are, because we have no business being in Syria in the first place.
I just want to say, God damn it, I miss Julian Assange's voice. I think it was a great idea to play that, and we need to keep playing more clips of him, because it's been so long since any of us have heard him talk. And it's, as now as we're starting a new decade, it really feels like a voice missing in all the chaos right now.
Yeah, and another point I want to make too here is that, as we are, not to get into the election, I don't want to get into that at all, but as we look towards 2020 and we are entering, deeper into this election cycle, it's important to put pressure on the candidates, but also do it in a respectful way and not harass them and be mean about it or really hard on them about it. That's not going to get people on our side. So we need to make sure that we do push the candidates, and we've talking about Bernie Sanders in particular, pushing him in the right direction on this issue, but doing it in a kind and soft way, I guess. And then also, again, ensuring that people are covering this in independent media. Ian, what are your thoughts on that clip? Assange laid it out and said that this generation is a more informed generation than previous ones.
Sure. Let me just get back to the candidates just for a second, if I could, because I think it's really the right time to start pushing candidates on expanding their narrative on what's going on with WikiLeaks and Assange. If you look at what's going on with the grand jury system in the US, I think it might be a better narrative to start going after them with this grand jury angle. Because not only do you have Chelsea Manning wrapped up in the grand jury investigation now, also in jail because of that, and punitively with the damages that you mentioned financially as well. But then you also have Jeremy Hammond extending his jail sentence as well, all from the same grand jury. And there's really no oversight for the grand jury at all. If the judge and the jury and the prosecutors all agree to keep going and going and going and going, this is never going to end. And I think that's a really fundamental question we need to start asking some of the candidates that are running. You know, we in the US and I think Liberia are the only two countries in the world that have a grand jury system like this, where you can a secret grand jury system like this. It's absolutely absurd. Where do they fall on it? What are they going to do about it? Because where does it end? Where does the secret stop? And I I I could speak a little bit about the media angle as well, but it kind of goes into kind of a weird place for me because I've just been thinking so much as I see the end of the year countdown as the most important people of the end of the year and whatnot. I just see so much effort on the media's part to create celebrities out of leaders of movements, and whether they're villains or whether they're heroes is sort of up to this media narrative. Like I think they've done a really excellent job of creating a villain narrative around Tulsi Gabbard. If you even see the SNL sketches about her, she's literally portrayed as a supervillain now. It's completely insane. You see Greta, I'm going to mispronounce her name, Thunberg, as the next rising celebrity on the left when it comes to climate change, which is fantastic. The left needs more left-wing celebrities, but that's a movement. It's not a celebrity cause. Yet that's the way they want to treat everything.
Well,
I work with the
they become fans of these people, it's really dangerous. And we've spoken about that a lot.
yeah.
To become fans and see them as like these rock stars and people to idolize, then they are able to get away with so much more because people give them a free pass when they act against what they promised to us.
Look, this is
And it's inappropriate to be
textbook intelligence community though. You
Yeah.
co-opt the movement, you take all the power out of it by turning it into a fad, and then you can easily dismiss it as a passing one in the press
Mhm.
and on TV and
Right.
anywhere else. You know, I mean, it's why we have to constantly address 10-year-old smears. It's why we have to
Yeah.
constantly explain the difference between what WikiLeaks does and what people think of as news outlets do. It's all reinforcing the narrative that especially when it comes to making a movement a popular thing, um it reinforces the narrative that there's only power in it if the media legitimizes
Well,
And the other thing too, what happens when you create heroes out of these people? Sorry, is that you end up creating team dynamics to where you're no longer fighting for an idea or for a policy. You're fighting for this person, regardless of what they say, what they do, how they act, the way their decisions as people with power impact your daily life. And it lets people say, hey, it's no different than the NBA. And it really fucking frustrates me to see people who genuinely believe in like substantial change to society get caught up in a personality and then just allow whoever supports that same idea to then just be divided because I don't support insert person as the champion of that idea and think everyone should champion it themselves. So
Well, I think we've seen a lot of that on this show as we've talked about the candidates and their stance on Assange. We've seen some candidates get held accountable for their stance, and other candidates, their fans, as I will call them fans, because essentially they create excuses and apologies for them, because it's more about the individual rather than the ideas. And yeah, then we start to have this team blue dynamic of we have to fight for these domestic policies. So that comes to the forefront, and Julian Assange gets pushed to the back.
Well, just to talk about Tulsi Gabbard because it was brought up really quick. First of all, me not being team blue or team red or team any of that, and just looking at who I think would be the best candidate, at least in that Democratic perspective, it should be insane for people to not see that no one is giving Gabbard credit for being the only person to put Mattis on the spot about the Duma attacks. She is the only person that asked if a chemical attack even occurred or they had any evidence of it whatsoever. Now, this is so prophetic because this is all the way back in April of 2018. If we had an honest media, number one, there would be at least one U.S. story about these OPCW leaks. There fucking isn't. There isn't.
Well,
I've got to go to Sputnik or RT. I mean, there's not a Reuters story. There's not an AP story about these things. There's nothing leaking to them. I mean, this is only in the international media. Tariq Hadid, again, working for Newsweek, had to leave after the third set of leaks. We now have a fourth set of leaks.
Yeah.
And we don't have
and
any
Tulsi
moderator.
hasn't even spoken out about, as far as I know, she's not spoken out about these leaks, unfortunately.
She did recently get asked about them. Actually, there is a YouTube clip at one of her recent events where she did address them.
And what was her response to that?
I know Dak asked her, and she said that she had not read the email. But has there been another question
That may
recently?
be the one. I just know that she's acknowledged them out there, but we got to also remember she hasn't been on a national stage with these people yet since these last two sets of leaks. But then again, she has been on a national stage how many times and not mentioned Julian Assange in
That's
those
right.
debates. Yes, when asked about it, and on Rogan's forum she's talked about it, but why not force the issue on a national stage? Not only because the candidates should answer, but the mainstream media puppets that are asking these predetermined questions should also be held accountable about Assange.
Jason,
it's
what was
so-
her response though? Like, how did she respond to that? I think the point that a lot of people are making here is the fact that she should be coming down hard on this because
big
she's
time.
smeared as an Assad apologist and should have been going around and really making it a major part of her campaign to say, look, I've been smeared about this and we are finding out in fact that I was right all along. And then it also really
She did a
pissed off
victory lap on
policy.
Jimmy Dore the other day. The video's up on Jimmy Dore's channel where she actually talked with him. This was probably about 3 or 4 days ago, maybe.
Okay.
Talked with him about the OPCW leaks and all that specifically, like specifically saying WikiLeaks and stuff like that on Jimmy's channel.
Yeah,
I'll
so
give
she
her-
is talking about it then, right? Because
That's
I was
good.
pretty
That's
sure she
good
wasn't
that
trying
she's
to hide
addressing
that.
it then.
Yeah,
Well,
she
I-
definitely, at
you know,
least
right
through
now-
alternative media, has addressed it. I don't know if she's addressed it on any mainstream sources, but in the alternative media, she's at least talked about it once.
Okay.
I'm pretty vocal on her when I disagree, as I am on all of these candidates. In fact, one of my things that I think she needs to hammer home more is Pakistan, their outward role in terror. They're funding Joe Biden, aiding and abetting that after 9/11. I mean, that should be the death knell, that Joe Biden met with one of the main financiers of 9/11 in the days after the attack period and is on tape twice talking about it being classified. That should eviscerate any kind of foreign policy for Joe Biden. But again, we don't have an honest media, and they're pushing old man Joe and grandma oatmeal and these establishment candidates. And again, I fear that Bernie, even though I know the big thing today that was trending and he has over 5 million donors, at the end of the day, he backed out in 2016. And guys like me aren't going to forget that.
Yeah, I honestly am very cautious with him as well. I think that I think that I thought he was a lot stronger in 2016, and then of course once he backed down and then supported Clinton, it made me suspicious. But I do wonder who is advising these people. But I think it's interesting also that we did see reports from mainstream media publications and outlets that he actually had a chance or has the chance to be the nominee or beat Trump per se. I know there were reports about that, which I thought was very interesting. But to go back to the OPCW, Ian, I want to get your thoughts in on this. We saw, these leaks come out, and neither side on the mainstream media has really covered it. But I think what's really more important here is the actual content of these leaks. What is your perspective on what we are seeing here, and maybe how Tulsi has perhaps failed to really address this on her own?
Well, I think it's a little amusing because anyone that even goes near the idea that Assad is a neutral player or even a good guy in the area is immediately eviscerated in the media. We actually had the exact same thing happen in the Green Party, where we had another presidential candidate still running named David Rold be one of the lone Assad um, truth tellers. And I think the Syrian media has been covering this quite some time now. He's actually informed me about this. So to see WikiLeaks come out and leak this is wonderful. To be frank with you, I think it's a nice end of year gift. The problem is that the mainstream media has already weighed in on their opinion about Assad in the region, and I really doubt they're going to all of a sudden change course because it just doesn't fit their narrative at all. Even when they're literally proven wrong, they're not interested in going down that path. And it you know, I think for the candidates that still I think certain candidates just don't want to step on any quote unquote media landmines. I don't think they want to go down that path and acknowledge the truth that we're seeing in front of our eyes. So I think you're going to
Well, they've
see.
been told their entire careers that the last thing they ever want to do is tell the truth. And they know that there's an overarching structure that involves the intelligence communities of several countries, that they know they're bit players in this. Even the ones running for president know that they're nominally bit players in this. So they're not going to do anything that's going to remove them from their sphere of influence. And that's the real problem, because nobody is holding these people accountable.
Yeah, I think that's where you see kind of the Bernie team going, is this idea that they want to be good Democrats no matter what, because they want that Democratic majority on their side to win the nomination.
Well, and
And
they honestly believe in the process.
Guys, I'm just seeing in our chat, and I want to make sure that this is true, but I'm seeing that somebody in the chat has just said, this is from Emberg33. He said Bernie Sanders' new campaign manager is on WikiLeaks with Neera Tanden on Libya. I don't know if that's true or not, but somebody is saying that. That's extremely interesting. And this is a new campaign manager, this Emberg said.
No, that's Faze Shakir. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
Okay.
But yeah, no, he was the guy who got shoved by Neera Tanden for bringing up I think Hillary or the Clinton Foundation and some donations.
Well,
I don't know. I also think that Bernie Sanders' campaign is filled with more moles than the Caddyshack golf course. So
yeah, I agree.
But it's by design. I mean, they really wanted to make an effort within the Democratic Party to prove that they were the party to the faction to grow the Democratic Party, and I think that's why you're seeing some of the media tide turn slightly to acknowledging that he has a big faction. I mean, he's not going away. He's not a bump in the polls kind of candidate. Has been very, very consistent. Probably one of the most consistent candidate in the polls.
You know, I just want to kind of shift gears because we're talking about Bernie Sanders, and I had your friend of the show who's confronted Bernie and many other candidates, and the fact that he's talked about being aware of the issue when right now, you know, we have now multiple different people, including his friend, over the last few days saying, hey, he's saying he's being sedated in there. He's slowly dying, even though he has a February court date. We don't know he's getting to February, and it's not just a magical day. You know, it could get postponed another couple weeks, months. He doesn't have access to the type of documentation he needs, and he does not look healthy in this photograph. Let's be honest. We have so many doctors that have now signed on saying that, you know, basically he's being tortured. The United States is allowing the British government to torture this guy on behalf of our policy, which is bullshit. I mean, this indictment is horrific. People should be standing up against it. The organization, once again, is still the most valid organization, putting out real documents exposing the military-industrial complex. And the lack of media coverage, even in the alternative media. It's great that Jimmy Dore's covering it, but it goes so far beyond partisanship. It's alarming. How do we change it in 2020? How do we go beyond the Bernie? If Bernie Sanders isn't going to help us, who do we get to help us, guys?
So
Okay.
for me, I would say the answer is we help ourselves. There's no heroes. No one's coming to save us. There's no white knights on horses riding in. Like, we as activists, as the people on the ground, as the ones who are intimately aware, like even if you're not acting in your local community or involved in some sort of activist group, we know, and I feel, me personally, like I have a responsibility to take that to actually act within the community, because I'm one of the people that knows what's going on right now. So there's something we like to shout out, and it's the idea of decentralized activism. It's literally just doing what you can with the time, money, and resources that you have. Everyone has lives. We live in a neoliberal shit show, but we can all do something, whether it's once a day, once a week, or just whenever you can. Go out in the street, shake hands, pass out flyers, put up posters on telephone poles, go to city council meetings and talk about these kinds of issues, because history's not made from people just waiting. But to shout out something
regardless of what Barack Obama says,
right?
Regardless of that, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to shout out what we're doing in DC real quick, because we have a protest planned from, I want to say it's February 24th, the beginning of Assange extradition hearing, running all the way through February 29th, with live vigils happening in DC.
Yes.
So we have a GoFundMe link. The same thing as well, we're trying to get Taylor and Steve to London to actually cover Julian's trial outside of Belmarsh prison. So if you could donate to that, I'm sure we'll throw the GoFundMe link into the chats. It's also in the show notes in the description. So that would be really cool if you could help us kind of take a whack at that to be able to make it out there and give like true coverage of the situation and what's going on.
Yeah, Andrew and I will be going to DC this coming week, actually early, to do a big interview with Lee Camp on Redacted Tonight. And that's sort of going to be kicking off. And we'll start releasing details of what and where we're going to be on those dates, and starting to invite people, starting to get all the other Assange groups in the US we've been communicating and have been helping us plan. So we are really excited about this to really converge on to Washington, D.C. Assange supporters have been growing this past year and have been planning more and more events. And so the fact that we can bring us all together into one spot, it's going to be pretty amazing. And, you know, if you cannot make it to DC, please plan an action during that week, wherever you are located. It still matters and it still makes a difference and it still helps people know that we care and that we are opposed to Assange's extradition to the US.
And it's not just free speech groups like pro-Assange groups that are doing this. I've reached out to multiple LGBT groups, literally every single one that signed the 2016 letter to President Obama that got Chelsea Manning's sentence commuted in the first place. I've called the heads of every one of those, left dozens of voicemails over this week, sent out probably 40 emails. So I'm trying, and I hope other people can get involved in asking groups to do this, to try to get them to plan their own events around that time in DC or in their local communities where they're acting. So if you are connected with any group or you know anyone in an activist group, see if you can try to get them to plan like an anti-tyranny or anti-imperialism or pro-Assange event around that same time in the end of February.
And also too, if you happen to go to other activist protests or demonstrations that are unrelated to free speech and Julian Assange, if you bring a sign, make sure on the other side of that sign you have free Assange or wear a WikiLeaks t-shirt. So you can also not only fight for the cause that you are, the demonstration that you're going to, but you could also bring the free Assange message there as well and get some of those people on board and kind of get them to also support Julian as well.
Well, I guess
So
I
I know.
want to, Jason.
What?
Jason, you mentioned Tarika Dodd a couple of times now.
Yeah.
Not this Sunday, but the following Sunday. Tariq will be on the Vigil series with us, as well as Greek Emmy on Twitter. I don't know her last
So,
name.
Steve, I've got you in a
Jimmy
little
Butland
spotlight
and
here.
Somerset Bean will be on with us on January 12th.
Oh, that's right. Now what, Jay?
I got you in the spotlight. How do you feel about the fact that the 27th comes around? The fourth release here includes the email. It's a pretty short page and a half email. I've highlighted that one where it shows. Listen, there is no toxicology that showed there was any chlorine attack whatsoever, and the open source videos also didn't show that. This is on the 27th. Then on the 29th, we have these strikes against supposed Hezbollah militias, where in Iraq and Syria, literally 2 days after this leak. And now we obviously have the situation in Baghdad. We have this, proxy war that's moving up. Do you feel that this was a response because of these leaks? And now with somebody like Hadid in the national media leaving and starting to get, more and more people talking about it, because now it is a term that some in the alternative media are talking about. Do you think this is a strategy by the military industrial complex to keep ignoring the fact that that was a fake attack in Syria, that we went in there with the CIA in 2012? How do you feel?
Yeah. I mean, that's not even a head scratcher at this point. Look, anytime any information about Syria comes out that is counter to what the military industrial complex, the global intelligence community wants, anytime that happens, there is automatically within 48 hours an incident that takes up 99.9% of media coverage and gives the United States a reason to drop some bombs. In this case, Iran has been on our hit list for over a decade. It was 2005 when General Wesley Clark named off the countries that were on our to-do list, and Iran is the last one standing. So whatever we can do. Look, Donald Trump needs a war. He's about ready to have an economic collapse. The Democratic establishment can't get him on impeachment, but the citizenry can get him on working 3 jobs to survive, on another impending financial collapse, which I don't know if we're going to be able to avoid this year. He needs a reason to take the spotlight off of his actual failings, not the ones that the media make up because the orange man bad, but his actual failings. This is all part of that. 100. You're absolutely right. I think that it's to look at it as if it's not related at this point, it is selling yourself something.
Plus, he genuinely hates Iran, and I think that was something different than what happened with Syria. Because with Syria, he really likes Erdogan. He really likes Turkey. So he really liked the idea of giving authority to that area to Turkey and his buddy Erdogan. I mean, that to me seems to be as an individualized policy at every single country. But going back just to decentralized activism for just a minute, here in the Baltimore area where I'm from, there was a young man who never had an arrest before, no problems with the authority, young black man on the wrong side of town, literally. And the sheriff's department took him in. He was in jail overnight over a weekend, and he apparently committed suicide, according to the sheriff's department in jail. And of course, that's complete BS. It's total nonsense. But focal folks in Baltimore were literally saying, this is garbage. We know this kid didn't commit suicide. We know this young man with a son and daughter didn't commit suicide. His mother was out there protesting with us, and we're making the connections, like us in the socialist world. We're making the connections, saying like the exact same kind of thing that they're doing to Julian Assange right now in Belmarsh, they've been doing to African Americans in Baltimore for decades. These are the connections that we have to make. We have to show that these fights are connected, and that they don't have the ultimate authority. They can't get away with sedating Assange and torturing him in prison. They can't get away with what they're doing to Chelsea Manning. And I think that's the next step for activists that care about those elections and have that pet candidate they want to talk about. Okay, fine. You don't like Julian Assange? Chelsea Manning is in prison as well. Chelsea Manning was pardoned by your best buddy, Democratic, holy cow, Barack Obama. Okay, so Trump literally called out Chelsea Manning. and Obama pardoning her. So are they gonna agree with Trump? Are they gonna just let Chelsea Manning rot in prison, or are they gonna take action? Like, I think there's ways to pin them into a corner because their logic is so ludicrous and so stupid. Whatever Trump does bad, okay, fine. Well, like, there's ways to get them, and unfortunately, this is the only time they're going to be accessible. And so I love what Dak is doing, because that gotcha, getting them on stage is better than when they're in the White House and they won't even, you can't even get through security. So this is the time.
And I hope we start getting questions to candidates, people like normal folks that go to their events, asking them about the OPCW leaks to see what they say, because they're not going to get asked anywhere else except for people on the ground.
And tape it. Tape it. I
Yes.
can't believe
Like-
Dak's videos have not gone viral. It is crazy to me that his
Like
videos.
It honestly, it makes sense. Like, why are they going to let them go viral? Like,
What's crazy though is that 10 years ago it would have. 5
Yep.
years ago it would have.
But you know what,
crackdown
Steve,
on
10
what
years ago, the alternative, the so-called Tomorrow News Today of the world, they would have been all over it, and they would have at least sparked it. And they don't even acknowledge that these people exist. They don't even acknowledge that Tulsi Gabbard is anti-war. Yeah, I get it. She's CFR. Someone just sent me the John Podesta masterminded her campaign nonsense. And I'm like, listen, I've shown you those emails. When it came, to the nuts of the matter, what did she do? She said, fuck you to Podesta. She said, fuck you to Hillary Clinton. And she supported Bernie Sanders when Bernie Sanders wouldn't support Bernie Sanders. That shows me that she's got more sack than just about everybody else on that side, no matter what my agreements are. I don't like the idea of a universal basic income. The fact is, again, she's the only person standing up for Julian Assange, for free speech, for a free press, and that is so important right now. And to my audience,
So, Jason,
Yeah.
actually, go ahead.
I just wanted to say to my audience to please consider supporting these guys and their GoFundMe to get them out to London so that we can get firsthand accounts of Julian Assange, of the situation. We can maybe set some things up with his law team, maybe get them on this program. Networking is everything, guys. And if you guys want them to network on the ground, have actual human to human conversation, not just, keyboard warrior, keyboard cowboy bullshit, which is great, but real action is so important, guys. And like I said, those DAC videos should be viral everywhere. When you look at how much the military industrial complex is making on a daily basis, they've got all the resources in the world, and we've basically got each other, Andrew.
That's true. And
if
Andrew,
you can, with
I
that
wanted to
Raytheon
talk
stock,
about
hold on, Taylor, wait a second. If we could jump back to the Raytheon stock, click to the 1 month view, because you can actually see as things are happening in the world, Raytheon stock goes down and then shoots right back up.
Yep.
I wanted to say something about the trip to London for Jason's viewers who have not heard Steve or I speak about what we plan on doing there. So the reason we want to go there is because we know that this is not going to be covered. The Julian Assange full extradition hearing in February is not going to be covered fairly or accurately. Steve and I both have journalism backgrounds. We are able to cover this. We know this case very well, and we will be live streaming as frequently as possible. We will be live streaming when it's necessary and there's something to show you guys throughout the court hearing during the day. And then also at night, probably at the hotel or wherever, we are going to also have just a live stream where we recap everything that happened that day and answer all of your questions. So it's well worth it if you can contribute. It's extremely helpful for us, and we are very grateful for that. But we will be giving you guys all of the details, and we will be providing you with the truth, because we know that, of course, the mainstream media that will probably cover this but not give it a lot of coverage are going to, of course, fabricate things, because we know historically they have done so with this case. And then also Christy and Andrew have their events in DC, and donations will also go to those very important protests. So they will be staying stateside, and Steve and I will be going to London. So we are grateful for your donations. And then also, if you can share that link, that's also really helpful. Share it on social media. we really appreciate that.
I don't want to make this sound like a pledge drive because this is totally unprompted, but I just want to say, whenever you see any candidate talk about the stance on Julian Assange, or all the candidates out there, any mainstream media reporter even will reference sort of inadvertently the amazing work that you all have done. Particularly some of Taylor's articles are referenced like all the time, and people know that she's the one behind that brilliant work, even if they're not getting the credit. So you all are doing a really amazing work, and you are getting the word out because people need to know where their candidates stand. It can't just be my candidate's amazing because I don't know, I shook his hand once, I live in New Hampshire, or because I have a button of him, or her. That's just not a good enough reason. We're a smarter society than that. We should be able to hold our people to account. And this is the only time to hold them to account. This is it. They're not going to get more accessible after this race. So do it now.
So we just got a $17 donation, I see. Thank
Yes.
you.
It was an anonymous one, so we don't have a name to thank, but thank you for the donation.
And once again, I really do hope that my audience supports these guys. This is on the ground journalism. They're talking to people like Tariq Hadid. They are having people go ask hard questions, put it on video, put it out for the world to see. Taylor is doing articles. These are weekly vigils. I may not be with them next week, but hopefully the week after that. And hopefully we'll have progressed. I hope you guys get to at least $2,000 by then, because it is important that you guys get out there and get on the ground. I mean, if anybody really needs to, it's you, because you're the ones focusing on this issue. If you had to give a shout out to anybody else that I'm missing, obviously not the John Pilgers and the Robert Fists of the world that have been on top of this in the European kind of semi-mainstream press, but what other, independent journalists do you feel are giving this subject the attention it deserves?
So the two that I would say,
Without a doubt,
just
Gordon Dimmick.
I was going to say Gordon Dimmick, and then also The Juice. They're an Australian political satire group, but they do really, really good videos about Assange that really help educate people about the situation. And they also have a couple that Julian appeared on himself personally too.
Yeah,
So
they did
Gordon
one
Dimmick,
before he was in the embassy, and then one when they actually went to the embassy, and they're really funny, and they really show Julian Assange's sense of humor and lightheartedness. That was back at a time when things were a little less dire for him, but they are a great, I don't know if you want to call them political satire, but because really they're telling some really hard truths about their country and the world.
They
Well,
presented
yeah,
it
I
in
mean,
an
that's what
interesting, fun, different way.
Yeah.
satire at its best is the most accurate thing in the room. It should be scalpel like in how it works. Um, and once again, we should mention Sunday, January 12th. Gordon Dimmick will be streaming on his channel. I will be streaming on my channel, Slow News Day. And we'll also be streaming here. And we will kick off at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time with Tariq and with Somerset Bean and with Emmy. And that will be fantastic. And the whole purpose of that show really like that is not only to highlight what's happened to Tariq Hadid, but also to fundraise for this trip, because we're getting down to the wire here. And if Bernard Jesus Sanders can have 5 million individual donations with an average of $22, I feel like us schlubs can get a couple of grand to go do actual journalism.
I think we can get you at least a couple grand and hopefully into about $5,000. I'm almost going to close out, guys, but I want to let everybody know you can go right now. You need to go right now to Action for Assange on YouTube. This is going to continue for a few more hours. Remember, you can help them out. You can donate right here at their GoFundMe. When you go and subscribe to their channel right now, you'll also see a link to this information. And if you haven't done the homework yourself and checked out the OPCW leaks, what are you waiting for? It's a click away. You have no excuse. All right. You have zero excuse. The information is there. You don't need somebody in a fancy little suit and a nice haircut and some great lighting to tell you what they're all about. It's here. It's the information age. Use it. I'm closing it out with you guys. You tell me who wants to close it out on your end, guys.
So it doesn't matter. Steve, you want to?
Oh, yeah, for everybody that's watching on Jason's channel, I just want to thank you guys for being a part of this tonight. I hope you will be return guests. We have these vigils every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And yeah, please go to WikiLeaks, read the OPCW reports, read and retain as much as you can so that you can, be a little bit more armed when you encounter mainstream bullshit.
Awesome.
And yeah, thanks, Jason. And
we'll see you guys soon. And keep up the great work. Ian, it was great meeting you. And once again, everybody, action the number 4 Assange to go and finish it out with those guys for the next several hours. I encourage you to go over there right now. All right. So, folks, if you like my work, oh, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of you guys, but I'm trying to do 3 things.
No, stay for it. Stay for it. I want to. You deserve credit too.
Later, Andrew. I'll see you guys later, man. So, everybody, I'll see you guys.
All right, guys.
So just to give him a shout out, because he dropped out before I was hoping he would give out his personal GoFundMe and stuff. He does not have a Patreon. He does not do PayPal or anything like that. He only has a GoFundMe that he uses. He is the creator of Loose Change. He's also has a dozen other not a dozen, like 6 other documentaries for free up on his YouTube channel. So definitely check him out because he's one of the creators. I was talking about it earlier in the stream during our pre-show. It was a decade ago, like literally 2019 was the end of the decade that I saw Loose Change. So like, I just want to say thank you to him for everything that he's done for our country and our communities and everything. So.
I just want to give a big shout out to Kathy Lloyd, who just made a donation to our GoFundMe. Thank you so much, Kathy. We did receive it. And I will plug in the GoFundMe link in the chat one more time if anybody would like to share and or donate. There you go.
So I know we have some other topics that we want to get to this evening. If we want to maybe, do we want to continue with the OPCW drops or do we want to start to discuss this recent phone call?
Well, if you don't mind, actually, I was going to talk about the phone call. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
cool. Yeah. You're probably referring to the Von Smith interview about the phone call that he got on Christmas.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull that article up while you're talking.
Yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking to hear Von Smith talk about it. If anyone's seen, like you were all talking about Julian Assange on the Juice, I've seen him on RT back in the day where he's just funny and vibrant and really into different whiskey and stuff like that on the show. If you ever seen the RT stuff, it's hilarious. And to hear him and talking to journalists from prison, saying that he's slurring his speech and basically like the article says, he's basically being sedated, or I'm not sure I really understand that. I'll leave that all to you to discuss. But it just sounds like in solitary confinement. I mean, you don't need me or other people on the show to tell you that he's being tortured. I mean, the UN has said he's being tortured repeatedly. Other organizations have said he's being tortured repeatedly. Now you have the same UN organization saying that Chelsea Manning's being tortured. So I mean, to me, it keeps coming back full circle. Like if you care about your candidate, if you're so interested in this election, this is your time to literally say to your candidate of choice or supporters of that candidate, where or do they stand on torture? Because 2 people are being tortured right now. One not even a U.S. citizen, the other one clearly a U.S. citizen. And where do we stand on this? What are we going to do as a country? Is this really where we've gone? So this to me is just the time to be outspoken about this.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. And what's criminal to me is that media isn't touching this at all. Why is Julian Assange being drugged in Belmarsh prison? Why? There's nothing in his history that says he needs to be sedated.
Right. So this article kind of clarified that he didn't specifically say it, but that Von Smith said it was very evident by his speech, the way he was talking, his mannerisms over the phone, that he is definitely, he's normally a highly articulate, very clear person when he speaks, and he sounded awful. It was very upsetting to hear from him. So I don't know how much more evidence we need and why people won't talk about this, that we have a publisher and a journalist who not only is being held as a political prisoner, but is evidently being drugged in some way, shape, or form, to the point where he doesn't sound like his normal self. Nobody's being held accountable either.
And there's no avenue to even hold anyone accountable. Like what way do we have to hold these people accountable? Like what
we have Nils Melzer, who has been writing letters to the UK. He just tweeted that it's been 60 days since his letter to the UK government, and they still haven't responded. So any avenues there are to have a response, an investigation, something, are completely being shut down and ignored by the UK.
And remember, the UK is obligated to respond to these letters that are being sent by Nils Melzer. They are obligated to do so under the law, and they have failed to provide an impartial investigation into this.
But only under international law as it applies to their membership in the UN. And if Boris Johnson is able to pull off like a hard Brexit, that doesn't apply to them.
So if I
go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I could offer a solution, or not a solution, but an action that people can take in this, go to Trump rallies and support meetings. And it sounds crazy, but they're the only group within the country, Trump's base, that holds political power, essentially, as far as a population goes. Speak with them on an issue-specific manner, if you choose to go, about Julian Assange. Because it's literally like the silver bullet to getting the bullshit about Donald Trump debunked. Whether he's fighting the deep state, whether he's fighting communism, or he's stopping the socialists, like whatever.
The whole Q narrative is set up to manufacture support for invading Iraq and for like to deactivate otherwise activated people.
And the situation is so fucking bad in Iraq that we have to stage false flag fucking attacks in a country that we're occupying to be able to send more troops there. So in a way,
embassy there to show that the United States had the biggest presence in the Mideast. That's what that was. It was a testament. It was a monument to our own hubris.
And WikiLeaks has a top 10. If you search WikiLeaks top 10, Sommer's being made great infographics for the top 10 leaks. It's like the DNC leaks, the Syria leak, the first set of Syria leaks where they showed how the US created the Syrian civil war, and a ton of other stuff. Print those out, take them to political rallies, whether it's Trump or someone else, and just hand them out. Because it's not even speaking about Julian the person, it's just giving facts that he had revealed. It's something that I did on Halloween when me and my kids were trick-or-treating. I had them pass out little flyers about WikiLeaks as they went around, because no one's going to say no to a 5-year-old handing them something. Like it's literally by all ways and means that we have an ability to fight back at this point. And I think that that's what 2020 needs to be. It needs to be organized, mobilize, communicate, and as much as you can, get change happening locally.
But this, I saw something Steve said that really resonated with me. You know, I mean, you literally have Trump from, you really have Assange from jail saying, "I'm slowly dying here." You've got multiple reports about him being tortured, and ultimately it comes down to the fact, like, what can we do? What if Boris Johnson leaves the EU and all that stuff? It's not really about that. It's more about the fact that these countries, in the name of either anti-terrorism or just pro-imperialist policies, just feel that they're completely immune to any international justice, completely immune to it. That's what this comes down to. It's a question of sovereignty, and it's a question of the idea that we don't have any international norms when it comes to human rights. And if it's one thing that Democrats and Republicans agree on in this country, it's that we don't have international norms when it comes to human rights. Because if you look at what they're doing on the border, they are literally, kids are dying on the border, literally from lack of basic health care in Trump's internment camps. But they're impeaching him because of a phone call to Ukraine, not because of literally killing immigrants. I mean, that to me is the ultimate statement of the US does what it wants when it wants. And that means it has the right to torture. That means it has the right to torture even through its allies. That means it has the right to be completely immune to international criminal courts. And the problem with this theory, even if you're the most flag waving Democrat or Republican around, the problem with this theory is that then other countries that are our vassal states, that are our puppet states like Israel and Saudi Arabia say, we could kill journalists, we could occupy Palestine, we can get away with it because we're a regime operative of the US. And I think
know,
that's the same thinking that the UK thinks too.
Yeah, Ian, you make a great point. They often say that human rights abuses that are done elsewhere in the world are usually made at the excuse because the United States does them. In the United States, and here in America, we do not want to admit that we are violating human rights, that we are torturing people, that we do not have a free press, but we're very quick to criticize other countries for their policies, specifically China and Russia and Iran.
Yeah.
The United States only cares about human rights when our enemies are violating someone's human rights. If it gives us some sort of perceived moral high ground to stand on. Other than that, we don't give a fuck. Like it we're currently involved in 4 active coups. When Trump is dropping more drones than Obama did, which is a ridiculous number in the first place. Nothing in terms of foreign policy has changed. You've got I know I'm preaching to the choir here with this particular audience. We've got to stop making heroes out of politicians, and we've got to start demanding actual agency. Revolutions don't happen at a ballot box, and you can't vote your way out of an oligarchy.
So I want to thank Misty so much for donating once again. Thank you so much, Misty. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
And to give her an extra shout out too, when the DNC was in the Columbus area for their protest, she went out on basically like second shift to put up more posters out there. So I want to give her a big thank you for that, because I don't know if I ever said thank you on air.
Yeah. So now is a good time. I am on vacation right now. Like I mentioned last week, I do feel guilty kind of jumping right now and getting out of this stream, but I am going to head out, and I want to thank Ian Schlackman for joining us this evening. He is still sticking with us. And then I also want to thank Jason Burmis for coming on. And again, thank you to my co-hosts. I really love you guys, and I'm so happy that in 2019 I did have the opportunity to connect with you all, and especially you, Andrew, because I wouldn't have any of this if it wasn't for us meeting. And I'm so unbelievably grateful for our friendship, as I am with Christy and Steve. And yeah, it's just been great creating this together and for doing these vigils. And we have a lot of work to do ahead of us in 2020. And it's getting very serious. It always has been serious, but now as we're approaching this extradition date, or this, I'm sorry, not extradition date, but extradition hearing, we need to really double down and work hard. And I'm just so happy that I was able to connect with all of you and do this work. So I am going to head out now. Happy New Year to all of our viewers. Thank you so much for always joining us every Wednesday. I look forward to what we are going to do in 2020. But I'm going to head out. And if you don't know me, my name is Taylor Hudak, and you can follow me at _ Taylor Hudak. Happy New Year, you guys.
And to give a shout out to the show that brought us together, it's Anonymous Bites Back on YouTube.
Yes.
They randomly reached out to both Taylor and I to come on the show at the same time, and it sparked this. So I appreciate those guys so much. So Thank you
Yeah.
to them too if they're watching.
Yes, thank you to them as well. All right, Happy New Year, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay tuned with this vigil. There's a lot of interesting stuff they have yet to speak about, but I'm going to head out now. Bye, guys.
Hi, Taylor. Happy New Year. Have fun.
Boy, Taylor.
All right, guys. What do you want to hit up now? Do we want to go back to the leaks and break them down a little bit more?
Yeah,
Yeah, we could.
we can definitely do that. I'm trying to figure out. I'm looking through them right now, trying to figure out what would be best to pull up. Where'd it go? Okay. There we go. I think that's a good one. I'm sorry, I need to pull this up on the share screen too.
You are
Give me a
okay.
So when did do we remember when the documentary Moose is releasing from Jeff Black? Is that this year? Is that
He was fundraising to finish it, I believe. I'm trying to remember if he said there was an actual release date or not.
Yeah, no, the fundraiser is for distribution.
Okay.
So they're in their last round of post-production now, and they need help to complete post and then distribute.
and he's actually, when it's released, gonna come on the vigil and do a live like commentary documentary viewer thing with us. That was really random, like from left field sort of thing, but that popped into my head.
Okay, so I should probably set this up. This is about the toxicology report that was released in the initial OPCW report, and it was heavily redacted.
It's amazing to me that this was redacted initially because I have a science background, and to redact any sort of scientific data, be it medical or something else, I just that just like blows my mind that you would redact any sort of science with numbers and because that's a big thing in science is you can make the data look like whatever you want if you hide stuff and if you skew things, if you throw things out without a reason. So the people that put trust into this redacted report initially, that's very frustrating to me from a science background, and I just wanted to point that out, that how almost I would say ignorant people were to believe a redacted report like this.
I mean, they're
Well,
paid to be
look,
dumb. Like they're in those.
It's a reinforcement.
I was just
Go
gonna say
ahead,
they're in
Andrew.
those. They're in those positions to approve those things and make these reports because they're going to accept things like that. Like these institutions don't exist for the protection of the common good of people. Even when an institution speaks up, like Nils Melzer does, it just gets ignored. So they're either hyper politicized.
Well, and Jason, to that real quick, Jason, who was on my show Sunday, and I said basically the same thing that you said just now, and he cut me off and was like, look, it's important to point out that the upper part of the bureaucracy are the people who ultimately redacted the report because they were dictated to by the State Department to come up with a report that supported their personal narrative, the narrative that best suited their aims and objectives. And that so far, at least 20 people who were part of this team have stepped forward to say, no, this is not right. You know, like whether or not they've done it publicly or through the emails that were leaked by one of the people on the fact-finding mission. But if you guys are unaware, that's where these are coming from. coming from somebody inside the OPCW, part of the fact-finding mission. I want to kind of go over this real quick because it is absolutely vital, and this is why we need WikiLeaks. So they had 3 toxicologists, 4 staff members from the OPCW traveled to a state party to conduct discussions with experts in toxicology, clinical pharmacology with professional background. The purpose of the visit was to solicit expert advice on the value of exhuming suspected victims of the alleged chemical attack, in particular, whether any evidence of exposure to chlorine gas, since no nerve agents had been detected in environmental or biological samples, could be gathered from biopsy samples. And the second objective was to elicit opinions from the forensic toxicologist regarding the observed and reported symptoms of the alleged victims of the Duma attack. More specifically, the OPCW team requested an evaluation by the toxicologist on whether the symptoms observed in victims were consistent with exposure to chlorine or other reactive chlorine gas. For this purpose, toxicologists were shown numerous open source videos and photographs of alleged victims of the suspected scene. With regards to the first point, and this is where I would love to get some comments from you guys off of these 2 points. The team was advised that there would be little use in conducting exhumations as the chances of gathering evidence would be almost impossible. The experts advised that because of the warm climatic convictions, manner of burial, likely in shallow graves and without coffins, and the time interval since the alleged incident, because again, this was weeks after it took place, but the United States did a retaliatory bombing immediately after. The OPCW fact-finding team didn't get to Duma until well after several war crimes were committed. At any rate, any lung tissue would have likely degraded to such an extent that any autopsy would be pointless. Moreover, given they were unaware of any such exhumations being conducted in the past to provide evidence of chlorine exposure. So this is, basically, if that's not self-explanatory, if you've got a body that's been kind of chucked into an open pit in the desert, you really can't get the kind of samples you would need to make a determination as to whether or not they were exposed to chlorine or other gas.
And then to point out the
regarding
propaganda, really quick, on this whole situation with the chlorine gas, CNN or whoever, whatever news station it was, sends a reporter to smell a backpack to say to the neoliberal population that, oh no, this really happened.
And
like
at that point, it was sarin gas that they were saying that he used too. That was right afterwards. And the media narrative at the time was it was sarin gas. And this fucking CNN reporter buries her head in that shit like she's motorboating it.
You know,
yeah, no, it's a little whiffy. I don't know.
You all are the experts here, but this just sounds like an extremely ridiculous amount of effort to try to conclude with the US's conclusions. I mean, the amount of work that they're trying to do to actually say, oh, maybe is just absolutely insane. I mean,
well, that's reporting now. You work backwards from the conclusion that you want to arrive at and fit the narrative around it, regardless of how flimsy it may be.
Right.
But and then even when it's debunked, you turn it into a joke of itself. Like when you had Rachel Maddow sit down with one of the other anchors on CNN, and he makes a Russiagate thing, and she's like, no, like that's bullshit kind of thing. Just so that way it all gets directed towards him. And it's this pre-packaged, predisposed, pre-thought out like shit show that just gets dropped in front of people. And 90% of everyone's too busy to actually look into it throughout their day. So it's just crazy the amount of things they're allowed to get away with like this. Because this is what, the second or third time that we've bombed Syria like this, where there was a gas attack and you crossed the red line and all that shit, that we were able to drop bombs in Syria.
Happens
every
almost every spring.
And the
Yeah.
thing that I want to give WikiLeaks the most fucking credit for right now is being the only person trying to stop a false flag before it starts. Like, I don't know in my lifetime the first time I saw an organization step up to take a swing to stop an actual false flag event that you can mark on your calendar every year is coming. So thank you to the team that is still there and still acting in the way that they are.
Absolutely, because otherwise we wouldn't have this little note right here. Just regarding the second item above, this is when they wanted toxicology, or when they wanted reports. Let's reference that real quick. Elicit opinions from the toxicologist regarding the observed reported symptoms of the alleged victims. With regarding the second item above, the chief expert summed up his conclusions by offering two possibilities that included, on one hand, a real chemical attack, and on the other, the possibility of the event being a propaganda exercise. This is, this is the OPCW's chief expert saying flat out, like, this could be a propaganda exercise, which, of course, like,
It makes it sound
Assange winning the
commonplace.
war,
Like, it
why
gives
wouldn't
it,
he gas his own?
it's like a term that that the people inside use. Like, okay, was this a real attack or was this a propaganda exercise? Like, which mode do we need to be in right now?
But what really pisses me off is every single time that I talk about, having a more global socialist vision and actually using independent agencies, supposedly democratic agencies like the UN, I get laughed at by a lot of leftists that are like, but the US has so much influence over that organization that it's laughable to actually trust them with anything at this point. And it's hilarious to me to actually then see an organization supposed to be independent, supposed to be international, like the OPCW, that actually then comes out and says, when this is finally leaked, that they were being pushed so hard down to this path. That to me, it really makes me upset, because you see so many hardcore right wingers that really push this narrative of like states only. I mean, I was literally on someone's show that just said we can't trust any sort of global international cooperation, and wars happen and people die. I mean, that was literally the guy's angle, and he was like this massive Trumper. And I leave that to your audience if these Trumpers or not. But that to me was just a ridiculous argument. Like, let military might win out the day. But that's literally what the U.S. is doing. The U.S. is using espionage and money and influence to literally perpetuate and twist and manipulate all these supposedly international agencies. And when we have an independent agency like the UN actually say that we're torturing folks, the mainstream media just completely ignores it. It doesn't even reach our radar. I mean, France is talking about it. Even the UK media is talking about it, but the US, not here.
And Julian, actually, to give a shout out.
Tweet is Noam Chomsky saying any dictator would marvel at the uniformity at which the U.S. media complies, something to that effect. They're the notion that we have this fourth estate in what is considered establishment media, that needs to be left in the last decade. It needed to be left 30 years ago. But I think at this point, that clip that we showed at the beginning of the show with Julian Assange saying that this is the most educated generation, that's only if the people have access to more information than they've ever had before. What they choose to do with it, and whether or not they choose to read it, or what type of media they choose to consume, those are improbabilities. But all of the information is there. Jesus, most of it's right there on the same site in WikiLeaks.
And really, we're only the most educated generation if we're smart enough to act on it, because otherwise we're just ignorant as fuck.
Well, and that was one of the reasons Julian spoke about why WikiLeaks started to do summary reports of their leaks, because they initially did just release the documents and thought that people would crowdsource and sort of start to investigate their own. But I think they saw, as some of their leaks were so dense or so many documents, they did sort of need a little summary guide to what was in these and to break them down. And I believe it was the Iraq war logs, or maybe the Afghan diaries. There's a lot of military um, lingo or codes, so they also had to have some people come in to help kind of break those down to understand exactly what they were looking at. So while we do have all this information there, sometimes you do need to kind of draw people into it. And as we've said before, when we have gone through leaks, WikiLeaks does a good job of giving a summary without necessarily giving a bias or their opinion on what happened, or um, they've always been very good at presenting the information and letting the reader decide what that information is telling them about that event. And
And I think WikiLeaks as a whole provides a great example for what an international agency should be. Because I don't believe in centralized international power. That, for any reason, whether it lasts for 100 years and we can create a great century, will be taken over and will be used against the population, no matter how great we can get a founding started for it. So I truly believe that it takes organizations like WikiLeaks to be the international watchdogs, but then it takes people to actually care, because that's all that the media is the thing that captures your attention for what you give a shit about. And don't let them do it. Like, that's like Julian warned about the artificial intelligence propaganda that's coming out, and that's something that they were starting to roll out. And then you see the entire research community, to circle back to a point that you made earlier, Christy, because there is a massive online research community, but they've been captured by the belief that the president's fighting the deep state, when
yeah,
all evidence and all indications show that he's working alongside them at best.
At best. Well, and look, this is something that we've talked about a number of times, where the narrative says you've got to pick a team, and you can't be an open-minded, critically thinking, diehard researcher and also believe that Donald Trump is a white hat who's fighting the deep state, unless you've picked that as your team. And then regardless of what you may find researching, you're going to make it fit into your belief system. This is something we touched on in one of the previous vigils, where once you've chosen a party or a particular celebrity inside of that party, it becomes much like a supernatural belief system. And when you try to talk to someone who is a believer, any evidence that you bring them that contradicts their current worldview, they're going to withdraw further into that worldview until they're backed so far into a corner that they go ass over tea kettle and decide to go do some reading. But it takes a lot. Is what I got on that.
I mean, what I listened to a lot of C-SPAN, and over this holiday, I was listening to Donald Trump just randomly out of nowhere just insult Barack Obama by mentioning Chelsea Manning, and I was just blown away by that. I was blown away by that, and that I think that just puts a huge hole in the idea that Trump is not a deep stater or he's fighting something in the background. I mean, if you're for truth, you're for truth. I mean, and that's something that I really like about WikiLeaks, is that it's for truth. You're getting unredacted sources, or you're getting sources that have been safely redacted or something like that. But you're getting the real thing from the source. You're not getting their spin on it, which I really, really appreciate. And I think that that's sort of a good angle to take with some of these folks that take this Trump fighting the deep state argument, because isn't he really just trying to get his own message out? Isn't he really just trying to spin it his way? And that's sort of the way that I see it. I see it if you're really against the quote unquote deep state, or if you're really against the idea of institutional power having some sort of monopoly, or just let the information be free. Just let the information be free. And there's no reason to keep Chelsea Manning in jail, and there's no reason to let the grand jury continue. I mean, that to me is the ultimate. That to me was what's so weird about this whole thing, is that, I mean, I guess you could think that Trump is in the midst of fighting a war with the deep state if you also think that he's a complete buffoon. I guess if that's their argument, it's such a weird argument to me.
Donald
So,
can't keep
Trump
up
and
on it.
Chelsea Manning have the exact same position on the grand jury process. They do. Like, Donald Trump is on record just dragging the grand jury process. But when it comes to acknowledging out loud that it's an illegitimate process as it relates to what's being done to Chelsea Manning, he's the one doing that to Chelsea Manning. Like, and that's something that his supporters can't seem to wrap their heads around. It's the Trump administration that is extraditing Julian Assange. It's Bob Barr. It's like it was Jeff Sessions' pipe dream. Jeff Sessions that was held up as a hero by the Q community while he wanted to have fucking poorhouses being brought back and fucking debtors' prisons and shit like that. Like, it's just the disconnect that it takes to be a fanboy of either major political party is astronomical. Like, it's
Yeah.
got to be something that people internally struggle with, because there are too many facts out there that just contradict their narrative.
and like with Jack Sith, he left a comment in the chat, said that Trump's fighting for his ego. And I 100% believe that. Like, there's been stuff that came out that show that Trump's broke. Like, whether you think it's just him fixing his taxes or what, I think he became president to stay relevant in the game of billionaires. I think that was the only power move he had left to stay as someone that could still have power and influence, because his time was up with all the bullshit that was going on around him. And I think that's why I think the Trump base is really the only people left in the country that can influence Donald Trump to make a decision, because you have him watching mainstream media constantly and going to rallies and playing golf with other billionaires.
And
So
it's
if you
so
actually
go
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
It's just really unfortunate that the QAnon narrative has subdued the Trump base into thinking that Julian is either A, safe, or B, that he needs to be brought here to testify against the swamp and will somehow vindicate and be set free for doing so. I'm not sure how we fight that narrative. It's been something that I've been trying to fight for a long time, and that narrative has
Because
done a number on
owning
that
the
base.
libs takes precedent to fucking doing the right thing. Like that, there's this entire community of just diehard Trump supporters that at the end of the day, if they feel like they're owning the libs, it doesn't matter what hypocrisies they've had to fucking sell themselves on. Like and that just goes back to the team narrative. We can't. We're not going to find the people who are there to reinforce the same power structure that imprisons Julian Assange, that imprisons Chelsea Manning, Jeremy Hammond, whistleblowers, more so now than even Barack Obama. We're not going to find people that are there to reinforce that power structure suddenly wake up benevolent. And that's not, it's not an easy conversation to have with someone who's adopted that team mentality as a religion or mixed it with their own, white Jesus Christianity.
So something too, I would love for Trump to fucking fight the deep state. Like, I don't like Donald Trump. I think he's a piece of shit. Every policy he's ever made up to this point is essentially garbage. But he's in a position where if he actually wanted to, he could fucking march half of Congress out in chains. Like, all the evidence is there. Like, we talk about it every week. We know how they rig elections. Like, we're fighting for the voting machines that they can't rig elections with.
Mm-hmm.
We know how they drop bombs. We know how they're complicit with torture. We know all of these things, but there's no one at that level that has any ability to hold them to account, and it's crazy.
But that's the whole theme, I think, for the evening, is that it's just a team narrative and it's a team sport. And the second those folks that were like very skeptical of the deep state or very interested in fighting corruption or just bringing sunlight, just bringing sunlight to those dark recesses of the world, as soon as they turn around and grab a MAGA hat, for some reason all the skepticism is gone. Trump can do no wrong. He's never in any position to do any wrong. I mean, it's sad and it's disappointing, but it's something that I think that the right and the left have dealt with for a really, really, really long time. We still haven't come to terms with. Because if you look at Barack Obama's presidency, Barack Obama would literally say in and out of office that I'm not going to do anything substantial in my administration unless there's a team of protesters out front, miles wide, showing me that I have to do it. I mean, like, he literally said it. He said that. He's in interviews saying that. And people were still like, oh, we got to support our boy. We got to just do whatever we can while he's in there.
And then when he was forced to confront it, he was like, yeah, go crack the heads of everyone in Zuccotti Park. Yeah, go ahead and open fire on those protesters at Standing Rock. Yeah, do that. That was his response to when he got elected. He told all of the progressives that helped get him there, that brand new coalition that he formed, fuck off. Rahm Emanuel stood up on a fucking table to tell everybody to shut the fuck up, and he didn't care about it. Like, that is
so to give
the whole part of his administration, or at least one of them.
But it's something that I think that I think that the radical right has a far better grip on it than the radical left. I hate to say that, but I just feel like that's the truth. Because you look at the Andrew Yang campaign. I mean, his whole hallmark is basic income guarantee, basic income guarantee, basic income guarantee. Like Martin Luther King and Welfare Rights National Organization, which is a group of welfare mothers who were literally the inspiration for what I think Reagan called the welfare queens. Like, there were actually women of color out there on the lines fighting for a basic income guarantee. But it looks different than Yang's basic income guarantee. It didn't cut social programs. Yang's basic income guarantee will cut some. But because of the way we do Team Red, Team Blue, Team Yang Gang, like, basic income guarantee is just what he talks about now. And before that, it was whatever Elon Musk was talking about, when he was sneezing into a handkerchief and accidentally said basic income. I mean, we've been allowing the media to bastardize and destroy really fantastic ideas and really great instincts of journalists by making it all about individual people and personalization. And I think Trump is just the archetype. It's just the quintessential example. And we've got to just be better at drilling down and getting sunlight out there, because this is just, I fear for a world where you have to just pick a side and do nothing but praise that candidate. It's just stupidity.
And
So
anyone who frames any,
I just want to take a quick break. I just want to thank Ian for his donation. We've got one from William Martyr. Thank you. We've had another anonymous one. And we just had $100 donation from Mia Carroll. So that put us way over our goal for tonight. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for sharing the link on Twitter. You guys are amazing, and you're going to help us get to DC and London. So keep sharing, keep donating. I just wanted to say thank you to those donations.
And so to get back to the conversation, I just want to say that don't trust anyone who tries to say that politics is a game or that there is teams, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a Trump supporter, or if you're a Bernie supporter, or you're a Hillary supporter. we're all getting fucked by the same system, controlled by the same people controlling the opposition. So it's time to, for 2020, lose that idea of team spirit and pick up the idea of like there's work to be done.
And I think look at WikiLeaks. I mean, you know, Julian Assange literally in Belmarsh at the edge of his life, and they're still publishing amazing, great sunlighting stories like this that you're never going to see anywhere else. I mean, you know, so it can't be about the person. It's got to be about the movement, and it's got to be about the ideas behind it. You know, people are fallible, and on top of that, the system knows how to go after people individually. I mean, look at Aaron Schwartz, you know, rest in peace. I mean, you know, they know what they're doing. They know how to break people. So it's really important that we keep the eye on the prize and the movement and in general.
And right now, to that point, Ian, the media is lionizing, and the New York Times just ran an article. I'm not going to say his name because it's not worth it. But Trump recently pardoned a war criminal. And we know he was a war criminal. He was sitting in Leavenworth for war crimes, and Trump pardons him. This guy is turning himself into a right-wing influencer. He's got merch, and the New York Times is like highlighting it and just giving you a link to his thing and like holding him up as a legitimate figure. Wow, Chelsea Manning, $185,000 in fines and counting. Second UN rapporteur on torture has confirmed that she's being tortured because it happened in 2012. We discussed that on her birthday vigil. This is not new. It's not even cyclical. It's just one straight line of fucking torture.
Well, when we've mentioned before, all of the groups that petitioned and protested to get her sentence commuted and get her released, so far have remained pretty silent through this. Andrew, I know I don't know if you want to talk about what you've done trying to connect with those groups. Have you heard back from anybody yet?
So I haven't, but I'll chalk it up to the holiday, hopefully.
That's true.
So I sent an email or message them multiple people through websites for literally every group that signed the 2016 letter in support of Chelsea Manning. I called and left voicemails for literally every phone number I could saying, hey, I'm with an organization fighting for Chelsea and Julian. I have time-sensitive information that I need to speak with you about. If you could please give me a call, my number is blank. And I hope that as this week turns on, I start to hear back from these people, and I would love to bring them on the vigil. Something that we might start doing just as an aside topic is doing like one-on-one or two hosts with one guest kind of interviews as well, and then releasing those during or before, after at some point around the vigil date, just to give kind of more content that we couldn't normally get on the show based on people's scheduling availabilities.
Well, speaking of the holidays, I am actually at a guest house, and I really should get going because I'm being a very rude guest being so late here. I apologize. But I really appreciate coming back on the show, and I will be back in Baltimore, DC area soon, and I'd be happy to talk to you all about what's going on there.
Yes, and if you are in that area at the end of February, we would love for you to come down and be part of our actions and our live vigils too. So keep those dates in mind.
I'm bringing a bus of people down from Baltimore. Don't worry.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That'll be awesome.
Get the bus drivers to each get friends to come and fill buses of people and bring them too.
Exactly. Sounds awesome. All right, thanks all. Have a great New Year's.
Thank you.
You too. Have a good night.
So real quick, while we're transitioning, I want to give a shout out to the 1 verse 5 I campaign. They're on Twitter at the number 1 verse, VS, the number 5, the letter I.
Yep.
And it's Susie Dawson's campaign. It's literal her fight and getting you to join on against the Five Eyes, which is an international intelligence alliance between the UK, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, and Australia. She's done awesome training camps. She puts out awesome content. And she's trying to sue them to be able to get these documents, to get information released, to try to hold these people accountable. Because that's been a big theme of the vigil this evening unintentionally, is we need accountability and we need agency. And she's one of the people that's stepped up at great personal cost to her to fight for this. So I would recommend for 2020 supporting her and checking out that content too. And again, that's at the number 5 VS, or the number 1 VS, the number 5, the letter I.
And just to kind of spin off that, we also have the Protect Susie campaign, and we have an open letter to help Susie as she's seeking asylum in Russia. And you can go to protectsusie.com to read that open letter, and please sign it and show your support, especially if you're a fan of Susie's work, whether it's the YouTube videos, Decipher You, 1 versus 5i, or the many, many articles that she has written and the work that she's done in Unity for Jay and for Julian Assange. All right, guys, what do you want to hit up next? Do we want to talk about Nils Melzer a little bit more? We mentioned him earlier.
Yeah, if we could, because I don't think we actually pulled up his letter on screen.
No, I'll do that right.
Okay. So I believe October 29th was, or about thereabouts, end of October, Nils Melzer wrote a letter to the UK government. And he recently tweeted at how that he has still not received a response to that. And we're over the 60-day mark on that. And so he addressed, serious violations. He's talking about Julian Assange's health.
There's and this thread goes down. This is a great point he makes right here in the third one. Under the Convention Against Torture, the UK government does not have the political discretion to simply reject such findings, but must conduct a prompt and impartial investigation, and if confirmed, prosecute the perpetrators and provide redress and rehabilitation to Mr. Assange. This is this just goes back to the continued lawlessness that surrounds each and every incident that has been delivered to Julian Assange by various governments and their intelligence agencies. The UK isn't even allowed to extradite Julian Assange for political reasons, and it's a purely political motivation behind his incarceration, torture, and imprisonment.
And so who's supposed to do that? I guess that's something we can talk to Gordon about. Maybe something we can look into with all of them. But there's no one to actually prosecute these people. Like, the judge is sitting in a room with a bunch of people from America walking back there saying, hey, what am I supposed to say?
Right.
Okay, cool, let me come back up here. Like, there's no, like, even with all of the evidence and with this being, as Ron Placone describes it, an Orwellian execution, like, literally watching this man publicly get shredded simply for the crime of speaking the truth, which is the highest act of treason that can happen when a society is completely flipped upside down.
There was, I was tweeting out some quotes from the book, Women Whistleblowing in WikiLeaks, and there was a good line about how if the West was honest with themselves and actually admitting to the fact that Julian Assange is a dissident who has become a political prisoner, that we would have to face a hard truth that we are living in a totalitarian world and state. And so, yeah, like Andrew said, the UN, obviously we have Nils Melzer who is writing these letters. He's not getting a response. So what is the next step? What can the UN actually do anything? Can they force this in some way, shape, or form? Is it the European Council on Human Rights that needs to step in? What do our next steps look like as far as the rule of the law, which we are clearly going outside of? So that is a frustrating point too, is that if there is a next step, if there is another organization we can go to, would it even matter? Or would they just get sidestepped like Nils Melzer is experiencing?
I'm assuming that they just get sidestepped, like that there would be absolutely, I won't say no way, but no way through our current legal process to actually make that happen. Because at this point, people in the UK aren't demanding anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, there was a series of letter writing campaigns to the MPs in the UK. Now that they've had an election, I'm not sure if that motion is still part of the Parliament option for MPs to sign on to. Yeah, it's doing what we're doing, the decentralized action, because clearly writing to our politicians and speaking to them isn't really going very far, and they're not likely to stand up either.
So there's a
That
tool that I
doesn't
like.
mean that we shouldn't stop trying to publicly shame them into
Right.
doing the right thing.
So there's
Right.
a fun Facebook Messenger tool, which will actually let you fuck with intelligence communities that are collecting your information in mass interception, but also with politicians. It's called ResistBot. It's actually a really good tool, and I don't ask that people abuse it. Like I do say, I ask that people actually do this to communicate messages, but it sends faxes for you. And faxes are the most annoying thing to ever receive in a professional settings because those things scream, right? So if you go on Facebook, look up resist bot, all one word, you can send faxes to people in state government and federal government, whether it's your governors, whether it's like lieutenant governor positions, state House of Representatives, state Senate, as well as federal positions, Senate, executive positions, stuff like that. So that's a really cool tool to just annoy the crap out of these people with what you're trying to say, because it'll get backed up and they'll have to listen to that dial-up tone all day as they receive these faxes over and over and over again. So,
That is an excellent idea.
but yeah, does the audience have any questions for us or anything? Is there?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, we can kind of do a little AMA, I guess, before we wrap for the night. We don't have a lot of news this week, so this kind of gives us a more opportunity to interact with you guys. Jack says, only thanks to all of you for what you do and deal with for all of us. Well, we are very happy to be here doing this. I think we all feel honored that we've come together and built this vigil and continue to do it and have an audience who interacts with us every week and watches us and supports us. So thank you for supporting this and for believing in the truth and Julian Assange.
So I have my answers to this, but I'll reserve them because I want to hear your guys's first. With us going into 2020, what do you think some signs are that we are winning would be, or that we are pushing back against the coming dystopia? So to word it in the words of Cypherpunk, like what would some policy things or community-based things be that could help with that in 2020 or show that it's happening?
Well, I think the fact that the extremes that the people who manage the narrative are going to keep that narrative going. Like I think the ridiculousness and the absurdity of the day-to-day distractions in terms of what are supposed to capture people's attention, um that shows that it's falling apart. The fact that Stephen Colbert is like trying to keep up with the internet in terms of the sort of humor that he's doing on his show, like using internet slang on a CBS monologue, that shows we're winning. There, I mean, if you put the last like 15 years of the internet together, and then you see the lengths that establishment media has gone to ignore it or to co-opt it, all of that is a wonderful sign that we're gaining ground. The the work that Vips is doing, the work that Joe Lauria and Elizabeth Voss do, Seeing Live, the 1 versus 5 I teach-ins, and then before that, Decipher You. Like there's I mean, I don't know. These are all signs to me that we're headed in the right direction.
What about you, Christy?
I mean, I echo a lot of what Steve said. I think really from our perspective of being in the activist world, watching it grow and watching as simple as, you know, we pay attention to how many people are watching our stream or how many views we get on our videos. And as we've seen that increase, that means more and more people are being exposed to the truth. And that gives me hope that we are pushing back. We are bringing in new people. We do interact with our chat a lot, so it is fun to see new people come in and get enlightened and get information for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. As far as policy goes, I don't know. I go back and forth on it. You know, I don't think anything policy is really going to happen big this year, especially with the primary season, the election, and then all of the impeachment. I don't know if anything bold is going to happen, at least in 2020. But it will, I guess it will be interesting to see what happens with the election. And I think if people are awake enough that if their candidate gets screwed over again and they actually raise hell about it, maybe then, yeah, maybe we can push back, because in 2016, that was really disappointing to see that more people didn't push back. So if there is a backlash this year to election corruption and whatever else they have up their sleeves, yeah, that would definitely be a sign that the tide is changing and the American people are not going to put up with that.
So my 3 big things, and I loved yours because I didn't even think about like the election rigging and all that stuff. So I love that, Christy. I think getting net neutrality reinstated would be a huge win. Whether it's done through municipal broadband, whether it's done through state level legislation, or whether it's done through the civilian takeover of the FCC. I think ending the Patriot Act, because it is set to expire this year around the time of Julian's the beginning of the extradition hearing, but also getting independent media to cover more of Julian Assange and to cover more of the previous WikiLeaks content and of the content that they're still putting out. And to give a creator a shout out for as much shit as everybody can give him for all of the stuff that he says and does wrong. Kyle Kalinske did do a relatively good job today.
Yes, our chat has been talking about that a lot tonight.
Yeah. So I don't think anyone personally is the most perfect person in the world. Like, everyone's had their own shit they go through. Everyone comes to different conclusions and ideas. Some people are just bad actors, right? But when someone with an audience that big puts out a relatively accurate and on point video, I appreciate it. So I don't think he'll ever even see this, but if Kyle's watching, like, thank you.
Agreed.
Kyle, if you're watching this, I think you're Tom Hartman's Padawan. And I just want you to know that. I challenge you to not be Tom Hartman's Padawan, but
that motherfucker hung up on me. Tom Hartman or whatever the fuck his name is. So I called into the show one day because they were having a conversation with some guy in the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic wing in the Congress and the House of Representatives. And I asked the guy, hey, why don't you think candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez support candidates outside of the Democratic Party if it's the position of progressives to take over the Democratic establishment? And he was like, oh, we're talking about the Green Party, and just hang up on me. And so fuck that guy. And
okay, I'm going to go to the next question because we got a bunch coming in. Frosty Buckets, excuse me. Then I would like to know about the Spanish spying case. Is there info about the case and the spying allowed in the Ecuadorian Embassy? as far as we know, after Julian testified on the 20th of December, I haven't really heard an update. I know there was a really great presentation in Europe over the course of this week. I have not gotten to watch that yet. But Jocelyn in the chat is saying that they did address the spying, so maybe they had some new revelations on that. Rob Juno asks, are you guys going to get together for real soon? Andrew and I will be together next week for the first time.
Yes, with Lee Camp on
With Lee
RT
Camp.
on the 6th.
And then, of course, for the extradition hearing, we will be back together in DC. Steve and Taylor will be in London together. As for the 4 of us getting together, yes, we hope so this year. We've got a few ideas brewing on where we want to go and what we could do. There's going to be a lot of different political events happening as we go to the election. That'll be prime time to do some Julian Assange actions. But as far as we would love to do a live vigil all together in the same room. That would be really awesome too. So yeah, we've got some ideas brewing. And so hopefully you'll get to see your 4 favorite hosts together in the same place soon. Cacti Juice said, what's the status of Julian at the moment and dates of coming events? Right now, I think with the new year, there are a few January events. I know People for Assange down in Sydney, I believe, are starting to host a weekly vigil. Scotland has a big rally coming up January 25th. I'm still gathering information on when people are planning actions through this month. But of course, I think actions will be building as the closer we get to the extradition hearing.
And be the action. Like don't wait for someone else to be the protest. Like be the person in your town with the signs or hanging them or passing out flyers, because that's literally from Denver to Bay Assange to groups in New York and all of that. Like all it is just a person saying, hey, I want to stand up for this, and finding another person that wants to stand up for it too, and then giving it a name for what they're fighting for. So don't wait to act. And then when you start acting, you'll be surprised how many people will actually start to fight with you.
I'm just waiting to see if there's any more questions. Let's see. I'm not seeing any yet. But yes, we are hoping that Lee Camp, can get him on a vigil at some point. It may be one of the live vigils we do in DC when we're there later in February. Please stay tuned, because yeah, we hope to have his help through that and to have him on our show as well. We are really excited to be on the show.
If you're in other people's chats regularly and they respond to the comments, don't hesitate to ask your other favorite content creators to come on to the vigils.
Yeah.
We don't know everyone, which a lot of this is like cold calling for the first time to ask somebody on the show. So if you feel like you've got a report going, please invite people to come on to the vigils here. Please do that.
So for Robin Adams, or Roden Adams, whoever that is, Tulsi is the only candidate who is standing up for Julian and free speech. That is an incorrect statement. We had Dario Hunter on, who is standing up for Julian Assange and free speech. We've had Adam Kokesh on, who is standing up for Julian Assange and free speech. There is more than just the Democrats and the Republicans that exist within this nation. And it's time that we let them know that there's more than just Democrats and Republicans. Whether it's independents, whether it's party affiliated, doesn't matter. But it has to be outside of a literal political organization that's designed to counter revolutionary movements with the way that its system is set up. So we have to organize outside of these control systems, and there are people outside of them that do support Julian Assange. But
Dominican Frankster, I just got this question today. What is Bernie Sanders' stand on currently on Julian Assange? His stand is to sit down and not acknowledge it whatsoever.
it's
He
President Obama's. I'm gonna watch it play out. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. That's
when he was
another
asked
video.
directly, when he was asked directly on camera, he flat out said, "Not yet."
I'm
You
aware of the
know,
situation, but not right now.
yeah. And look, the only statements that he's made in terms of what he would do as president regarding whistleblowers, the only whistleblower he mentioned was the CIA agent attached to the White House who reported on Trump's Ukraine call. That individual doesn't even meet any of the basic requirements of being a whistleblower. When Ryan Grimm said, "Hey, what about Reality Winner?" I've never heard of Reality Winner. I don't know anything. But like, he did the same thing with Reality Winner that he did with Tim Canova. Like, all knowledge evaporated out of his head, and he had no idea what Ryan Grimm was talking about. AOC was there for that interview. She immediately steps in with like, "Well, hey, we don't want to mention any names here. We're not. That's not the point of this. We just want to make a nice fluffy statement and let people extrapolate whatever they want out of it."
And I can't remember the exact words that AOC said, but it was legit something along the lines of like, I have to ask to be able to make a comment on that. Like, I have to know what I have to be able to say. Basically, like, I have to seek permission to make a comment upon that, essentially. But so we did have 2 questions come in that I can answer in the same swoop. Jimmy Dore coming on soon. I hope so. I message Jimmy, Steph constantly. Like, they probably fucking hate me because I blow their inbox up probably about twice a week. And then, have you thought about inviting Tulsi on the vigils for an interview? Leading
We
up
have.
to the
We
Democratic
have
debate
tried.
that she was excluded from, I messaged everyone I could, as much as I could, to get her like here on the vigil instead of going, because she couldn't do the debate stage because she wasn't on. We've reached out to her before then. We've reached out to her since then. I would love to have Tulsi, Adam, and Dario on all at the same time to let them talk about these issues, because those are both very well educated people when it comes to these problems, and both candidates that are worth their weight, essentially. But we try. Like
Yeah.
Steve's point of
Yeah.
cold calling, like I literally have, like I worked for a political marketing organization back in 2017 and 2018. I have a list of people that I cold called for everyone from like the Sam Ronins of the world to literally every Justice Democrat there was. I was in contact with their campaign. So like we cold call everybody. Like I sold cars for a long time. So when we try to get someone on this vigil, it's more or less like a semi-relentless effort until they respond or just stop responding. Because we don't know anybody. Like we're just normal people.
Another question from Dominican Frankster. Is it hypocritical to cancel Yang because he believes Assange should stand trial? No,
Yes.
I don't
No.
think so, because if you watch that whole video, Yang's reasoning for that is completely incorrect. You know, he validates and uses the smear that those leaks put people in harm's way, and that he would actually receive justice here and have a fair trial. That's the narrative that Yang is pushing. So if Julian Assange, free speech and free press is important to you, I would say no, it's not hypocritical to say, nope, I'm not voting for you, Andrew Yang, because you clearly have your facts wrong and you don't support any of those things.
So the reason I
Not
say
only
yes
that,
and
but
no
if
to
you
that,
watch any of the interviews that John Kiriakou has done in the last like 14 months, he is very, very adamant, because he went through the process himself, about the complete lack of fair trial that Julian Assange would receive here in the US in espionage court. Yeah, John has, aside from firsthand experience, he's got a great way of laying out exactly how the court proceedings go. Again, because he lived through them. And either Andrew Yang is just really naive. He's not. He was part of Obama's administration. Or he knows and he's playing politics in a game, not only with a man's life, but with free press on the chopping block as well. That's
And even beyond that,
there's nothing
all he
hypocritical. And
is,
by the way, like it's not about canceling Yang. I mean, it's a primary for fuck's sake. Yeah, granted, it's rigged, but like part of the primary process is getting to know where the candidates stand so that you can make an informed decision as to whether or not you want to vote for them. If a free press is a deal breaker for you, then Yang is not your guy.
Right.
and I say yes and no to him being a hypocrite about it, simply because there's so many other reasons why you should cancel Yang. Like, he pushes Cato Study Institute think tank talking points for his like economic policies. And above and beyond that, he's hyper politicizing people into a team dynamic when it's a problem that we all share commonly. And Andrew Yang can't be the solution to that problem. It is people taking control of the situation and saying, none of these institutions can solve these problems.
Right.
Look, and I mean, yeah, no, at least with Andrew Yang, like
I've invited him on too.
Healthcare is an issue for you. Joe Biden looked at Andrew Yang's healthcare plan and was like, "Ooh, that's a bit harsh, don't you think?" Like, I mean, it's just there's so many reasons to not want to support the guy, even if you want to participate in a rig system.
Yeah, so Frosty Buckets asked, what is your opinion about Birdie being a prime candidate for Vault 7 malware and pushing him in a direction that he thinks is good? I don't think they really need to use the malware. Like,
Nope.
they have enough political influence. They can get him to say and do whatever they want. He was on the Senate floor screaming about Russia. Like, he's already doing what they want, so to speak. And I would love for him to change direction and been like, oh, I played him to get in this position of power. You were all right. Now here, let me stand up for the right shit and attack the points that will actually break down their infrastructure as far as political and networking and all that goes. But I don't think they need the Vault 7 malware to influence Bernie Sanders.
Oh, this one is a question for Kevin. We haven't really seen Kevin tonight. Will you be meeting with Andrew and Christy on either of your DC visits? We want to see the three of you together in a selfie. So Kevin, if you're up for it, we would love to meet you in person. Maybe he could come on the vigil. Kevin, you're welcome on the vigil anytime.
I've got questions for Kevin. I do.
Yeah.
I do. And yeah, no, to touch on that question from Frosty Buckets a little bit more. Bernie Sanders is where he is right now for one of two reasons. And the first reason is the reason that I think most people earnestly believe to want to believe, and that he's a guy who thinks that this process is how we can solve our collective societal ills. The other side to that coin is that he's a completely co-opted sheepdog who just exists to pull people into a party that by definition will never represent them unless they are part of a very small moneyed elite. And I would like to think that it's the former and not the latter. in that. But it's one or the other. And there's no Vault 7 malware needed. You know, there's enough direct influence on him by the people in his immediate circle that help shape and inform his opinions.
Like the Rokanas of the world, who will go on and say
Yeah.
that Nancy Pelosi's doing a great job, and that doesn't point out that she got read-in and torture in 2003. How do you have a
Doesn't
conversation
even-
about Nancy Pelosi without talking about the fact that she knew about NSA spying before it was public record, and it was still illegal? Not that it shouldn't be illegal, but back then it was illegal. So, like, the people he surrounds himself with are just as neoliberal as the people he pretends that he's fighting or wants to be fighting, depending on how you feel about Bernie Sanders.
We did get another donation, but this one was, again, anonymous. So thank you, anonymous person, for the $50 donation. We truly appreciate each and every one of you donating. We did have one more question in the chat. If Kyle wants to start covering Assange, how about he be on a vigil where he can talk to Dag and the rest of you? Of course, we would welcome Kyle to be on here and have a discussion.
I'll
Unfortunately,
even behave.
Kyle was one of the first creators I found on YouTube. Like, my original group of creators was Jimmy Dore, Humanist Report, and Kyle Kalinske, because at the time they weren't being censored that heavily. So it creates almost like a pipeline if they do what they're supposed to be doing the right way, more or less.
Well, and at the time, this is the thing though. At the time, they also weren't staking their financial livelihood on whether or not they self-censored.
Right. Kyle
And-
Kalinske and Humanist Report both weren't owned by TYT at that time. Jimmy
Right.
was.
No, both of them went into that partnership with TYT eyes wide open on who they were as an organization. And their content, at least Humanist Report's content, has suffered he's the Tommy Lahren of the left. I think that Quinn Peterson coined that phrase. I think. But yeah, I mean, that's where Mike has gone with his content. It's sad. It to just look, like there's enough partisan hacks in mainstream media. That's why we went to independent media in the first place, was to get away from the partisan hackery and the narrative management. And if all you're doing with your independent media channel is telling people why one Democrat is better than another, or why one Democrat is better than a Republican, you're fucking there's a reason I call Cenk Uygur cable news on the internet guy. That's what he does cable news on the internet, and the fucking people that he's got hooked into his network are doing cable news on the internet. That's not independent media.
So Frosty Buckets basically brings something up about a previous question, about how Vault 7 literally showed that they have programs that can alter the text on your screen, give you fake articles, things like that. That is a tool that was shown that does exist. So I want to make sure that we can all agree upon that common reality that, like, they have those things. We just don't think it's necessary for relation to your question. For other people, it is. For normal people, it's something that you can use to target people individually with propaganda.
Yeah, no, and yeah, he's right about that, and I do think so. I don't know how much Bernie doesn't seem to me like the type of guy who hops on his phone for news. He seems like the type of guy that would grab a paper or read a book. Like, and I mean, that's just an impression. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't know, man. If he consumes his news on the internet, then yes, we're all susceptible to that kind of targeting. We all are.
And to shout out Ray McGovern, the Mickey Mat, the Military Industrial Congressional Intelligence Agency Media Academic Think Tank Industrial Complex. That's what we're fighting back against. And I hope everyone coming into 2020 will join us.
Yeah, and I love that Ray includes academia in that, because it reinforces something that Cynthia McKinney talks about, especially because in order to become a part of the university system, she had to go to Bangladesh in order to do it, because nobody in the States would fucking have her. But she has said that the academia, and specifically like the more notable institutions, have become the home of COINTELPRO. And I mean, that it's hard to argue. It really is, especially when you see the kind of party line or overall narrative reinforcement that these schools want from their journalists.
Do you guys ever think about who the 40 viewers are that don't interact in our chat?
There's some people that just aren't into it. There's some people that you know, are fucking have this on in the background while they're doing other shit.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
everybody is savvy with the YouTube live chat, but I'm glad they're watching nonetheless.
Absolutely.
And not only that, man, like there's some the regularity and the frequency of the commenters that we do have, like that could be intimidating for a couple of, you know, for some people, if they're not already a part of a regular commenter on YouTube. Like I can see that happening.
Yeah, I will say tonight specifically, our chat is moving very quickly for our chat. I've seen the chat on some bigger shows like Jimmy Dore, and I can't even imagine trying to get in on that and having a conversation. So yeah, I can see that being a little intimidating too, to try to jump into and talk. We have established a very good community here and kind of have our chat regulars, but I do love seeing every week we get a few more new people that come in. And I think having Jason on and bringing his people over to us after he left, that always kind of brings us a couple newbies and some more subscribers too.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're here on Jason's channel, thank you. And please, while you're at it, check out my channel. Here on the YouTubes, I host a show called Slow News Day. Jason's been on a handful of times now. And yeah, I do what I can to go to primary source material or the independent journalists who you know, write the pieces that I cite on my show. I don't use mainstream media sources. I kind of feel like if your independent media channel shows establishment media clips and all you're doing is wagging your finger at them, you know, it's a step in the right direction, but I'm the next step.
All right, I will go next. My name is Christy Doff. You can find me at Christy Doff on Twitter. Please look out. We're hoping the Lee Camp interview is out sometime next week. We will for sure tweet it when it is. Otherwise, Happy New Year to everybody, and we're so glad you're here. Thank you for spending your New Year's Day with us, New Year's Day evening, and Christmas last week. We were fortunate enough to get a couple holidays on our regular time, and just keep the January 12th date open. That is a Sunday, and we will be live streaming with Gordon Dimmick and having a lot of amazing guests and topics as we fundraise to get us to DC and London.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Andrew Zigman. My name's Andrew Smith. You can follow us on Twitter as a collective at action_ for Assange. And thank you guys for joining us this evening.